You guys all feel pretty comfortable with the stuff we did the other day on the alternation of generations? Can someone just explain to me what the alternation of generations in plants means?
It's basically like the first generation, they're just like the spores and they're like dispersing off. And then the second generation, it's the the first generation is still part of like the gametophytes. I think that's what it's called. And then when they divide and make like the new plant, then that's the second generation.
Okay. Well, okay. So that's a good like starting point. But so like you don't have to necessarily say first generation or second generation because it's sort of like a cycle. So, but I want to know like which one's diploid and which one's haploid and which one's called which and which one makes the spores and which one makes the gametes and which one, undergoes fertilization and which one undergoes like mitosis and meiosis and stuff like that. Can you give me a little more specifics about that?
Yeah, so the gametophytes, those are the haploids.
Okay.
And then the sporophytes, I think that was what they're called. Those are the diploid ones, and they go under meiosis.
Good. The sporophytes undergo meiosis to create what?
Spores.
Spores, which are what? Haploid or diploid?
Haploid.
Haploid. And then those haploid spores then undergo what process to become a full-fledged gametophyte?
Mitosis.
Mitosis, right? And a gametophyte and the spore that made it, like the original spore that started it, and the ultimate multicellular organism plant is also just haploid, even though that's kind of weird to have a multicellular haploid organism because humans don't have that obviously, but they do. So the idea is, the alternation of generations is that you have a multicellular diploid organism, but then you also have a multicellular haploid organism, and they kind of like switch generations, right? So the sporophyte is the diploid, multicellular diploid, which then gives rise to, by meiosis, to the spores, which then divide by mitosis to make the other generation, the multicellular haploid gametophyte. And then the gametophyte keeps, dividing by mitosis to then make the gametes, which then come together through fertilization to recreate to make the zygote, to restore the diploid number. And then that zygote then divides by mitosis to make the full-fledged diploid sporophyte, right? All right, and you guys remember the different, the different, what else did we talk about the other day about plants? We talked about the uses and like the function, the roles that they play in the ecosystem, right? Something like that. Okay. All right. So today we're going to talk about this concept called tropism. I don't know if we talked about it in the beginning of the year. I don't think so. But tropism basically means it's like the growth of a plant. So plants, like, although they're slower to do so, they do still react and respond to their environments, right? Remember we talked about like how response to stimuli in your environment is one of the characteristics of life in the beginning of the course, right? So one of the ways that plants respond to their environment is through this thing called phototropism. Photo means light, and tropism means like sort of response or like bending or facing. So that's like an example of, and I'll give examples afterwards, but phototropism means like a plant's response to light. Geotropism or gravitropism is a plant's response to the earth or like the gravitational pull from the earth, right? And so if a plant grows down toward the earth, it's known as a positive geotropism, which is kind of counterintuitive because you think positive is growing up, but actually positive geotropism means it's growing toward that stimulus, which is gravity, which would be growing down. Whereas a negative geotropism would be growing up away from the earth, which is, so that's like the leaves and stems and stuff grow negatively from the earth, whereas the roots grow down toward the earth, right? And then there's this other thing called thigmotropism, which basically is like response to touch, right? So if there's like something in your general vicinity, if you're a plant and there's something in your general vicinity, you are affected by that and you grow either toward it, which would be positive, or you grow away from it, which is the negative one. Okay. So phototropism, you guys have all seen examples of these, right? When a plant grows toward the sun, right? So this is obviously a cartoon of it, but then what are these? Have you guys ever seen like a field of sunflowers? No, there's like this farm in Manalapan, I think, which we went to last year, but it's really funny because, all these sunflowers really, they just like face where the sun is, right? So this is an example of phototropism because they grow toward the sun, right? And look at this, here's the window with the light presumably coming in through here. So then these plants are growing toward it, right? So these are all examples of phototropism. Geotropism, again, so in a single plant, you can have positive geotropism, which is, again, growing up or down?
Down.
Down, right? So this is positively geotropic. The roots are positively geotropic, right? Whereas the leaves and the stems are negatively geotropic because they're growing away from the earth. But again, just be a little careful with that concept because, the word positive can be a little misleading. Positive means towards that thing. So towards the earth, which means down, right? Okay. Have you guys ever seen plants do something like this? Right? So if there's like a stick here or some sort of like a building or a structure, a wall, a house, things like ivy actually like use that touch and they grow toward it, right? Because they use it for support. So would this be positive or negative thigmotropism, you think?
Positive.
Positive, right? Whereas like if, something is like pushing on something and the plant moves away from it, then that would be negative thigmotropism, right? And if you guys have seen something like this, right? What is this? Maybe I don't know if you've seen it actually, but
Venus fly.
Exactly, right? So it's a Venus flytrap, and so it responds to touch. So once it senses that fly there, it closes in and eats it, right? And so that's an example of a positive thigmotropism because it's growing. It moves toward the stimulus, right? Good. Okay, and now you think of like, of humans having hormones, right? You guys know what hormones are? They're basically like, they could be different types of molecules, but they are sent from one organ and they target another organ. So it's not like it's not like a neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters are sent out and they target like the next cell, like right next to them, right? Whereas hormones need to be carried longer distances to affect the organ that they are targeting, right? So anyway, so plants have hormones too, which, sounds almost like, funny because, you don't think of plants having hormones. But, and these are the different hormones. So you should memorize these hormones and what their role is in the plant. So auxin, that's a type of, like a class of hormones. And they actually like stimulate growth and elongation, so that they help the plant get larger. And I always think of like augmenting, which means like to increase, right? So auxin, augmenting growth, elongation. There's one called abscisic acid, and that's actually like that's the only negative one. So this one actually like inhibits the growth. So when the plant is like large enough and you don't want to keep making new roots or new leaves or new shoots, it actually, when this is released, the plant actually stops developing new like, offshoots or like different branches and stuff. So it stops, this actually inhibits the growth. This is a negative hormone, right? And it also not encourages, what's the word? Like it prompts the plant to go dormant. So like when the conditions are unfavorable, like, when in the winter, right? This is released and then the whole plant is, triggered to, shed its leaves or to go dormant, right? There's another plant hormone called ethylene, which is actually involved in ripening of the plant, right? So do you guys know, like, have you heard like if you want to ripen fruit quickly, you like put them in a bag, in a paper bag, and then like close the paper bag, and then like basically it's like this hormone that pretty much gets sort of like released and then causes the ripening. And you guys have all heard that expression, like one bad barrel, one rotten apple spoils the bunch, or like, have you heard of that, right? So basically that's kind of like based in truth, because once one plant starts releasing ethylene, it prompts the other ones to ripen quicker. So ethylene is involved in ripening. Again, these are all hormones, plant hormones. And then there are these ones called, I don't know how to pronounce this, whether it's like gibberellins or gibberellins, but we don't have to actually say it. So just be able to recognize it. And these are also similar to auxin in that they also stimulate plant growth, right, and elongation. And then cytokinins, kind of like the word is kind of similar to cytokines, right? Do you guys remember cytokines in the immune response, right? But it's very different from those, so don't get them confused. Cytokines were those like there were like those messengers that were sent out to get more white blood cells, right, involved in the immune response. Cytokinins, what word do you kind of see in here?
Cytokinesis.
Cytokinesis, exactly. And if you're performing cytokinesis, what is the cell doing? Dividing. So what would that overall effect of that be on the plant then? If a cell's dividing, that means that it's growing, right? Or it's, obviously multiplying. So then this cytokinins are also involved in growth and and development, right? And so these three, auxin, gibberellins, and the cytokinins are all involved in like growth and elongation. These actually inhibit the growth and prompt the dormancy, right? And then ethylene is for ripening. Okay, so you should know those functions of those hormones. I think that's the hardest part of this, just memorizing those plant hormones. Okay, could I move on? Any questions here so far? No? Okay, so you also, and this is like to sort of like introduce our whole unit on photosynthesis, you have to know a little bit about the leaf anatomy. Like, we're not going to go crazy with this, like, because some textbooks and some like botany courses will make you like memorize every single different layer of a stem and of a root, and like they're not the same, believe it or not. So we're not going to do that. I just want you to know the general like leaf pattern so that you know where photosynthesis is actually occurring. Okay. So, did I just list them here? Why did I do that? All right, I'm just going to show you the picture here first, right? So basically there's the cuticle. That's this top layer. It's not these cells. It's like this waxy coating. So like that top green layer of cells right there, that's called the cuticle. That makes up the waxy like protective coat on it, right? On the leaf, so that like it doesn't get degraded by water or other substances. There's actually like a cuticle on the bottom too, in some cases. So the cuticle is like the protective layer on the outside of the leaf. Okay. Then we have the epidermis. Epidermis is like the top layer of skin or like of cells that line the cuticle, right? So like underneath the surface. Okay. After that, there's this layer called the palisade mesophyll. And palisade, does anyone know what that means, the word palisade? Anyone? No? Any guesses? No. Palisade is like it's like a cliff, right? I always like think that, like just to remember that, it kind of like it's like a not a cliff, but like kind of like it can be like these like pointy like rocks or like fences or So it looks kind of like a fence, right? So it's like these like cliffs or rocks or fence. Okay, so that's the palisade mesophyll, and this is where photosynthesis occurs. And then in some cases, it also occurs in the spongy mesophyll. Do you see like how the spongy mesophyll is like a little bit more loosely distributed? So you'd be able to distinguish between the palisade mesophyll and the spongy mesophyll. And in some cells, like, you know, it stores carbon dioxide in here, and then it doesn't go into this layer until later. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, they have like slightly different roles. You guys don't have to distinguish between them. Just know that this one has more holes in it, and think of sponge holes, right? And then there's the vein, right? The vein this is the pipes of a vascular plant that will carry water to the leaf, which it needs in order to undergo photosynthesis. You'll see why when we get into photosynthesis. But it also needs to carry the sugar that's made in the leaf to the other areas of the plant. So the vein, this is also known as the vascular bundle. It has a xylem and a phloem in here. All right. And then we have this like lower epidermis area right here, right? Do you see that here? And then within the lower epidermis, there are also these little holes. They're like little pores, and those are called stoma. That's the singular form, and stomata is the plural form. And those are basically like, they allow carbon dioxide to go in, and they let water evaporate out. So those are really important, and they can open and close depending on the conditions. So these are called stoma or stomata. Okay. And let me just go back. So these are just I think I just listed all these in order. And then guard cells. All right, so the guard cells are these little cells on either side of the stoma that control their opening and closing. All right, that's what guard cells are. Let's see what else I have here. Okay, so when the guard cells, when those guard cells are limp, or like when they're like kind of, they don't have water in them, they'll be closed, right? Does that make sense? So like think about like, yeah, when these are limp, they can't stay open and like support the that opening to be open. So they like kind of just like deflate, and then they like kind of like sink together to close the stoma, right? But when these are very like filled with water and very taut and very like, strong, they can like stand up so that they can support the opening to be open, right? So you should probably memorize that. You should know that when they're limp, the stomata are closed, right? When those guard cells, which are on either side of the stoma, if they're limp, then the stomata is closed. If they're open, then the stomata is open. Okay. And then the word transpiration, have you guys heard of that? I think I mentioned it the other day, but transpiration means that it's like the evaporation of water from the plants, and that occurs via the stomata, right? So the water will maybe go from here and evaporate into the air, which is like out here. And each time one water molecule evaporates here, it pulls more water molecules up through the xylem. Because of cohesion, so they can kind of like pull each other along. So that's how the water circulates throughout the plant. Okay. Any questions? No. All right. So if I gave you like a different picture, you'd still be able to like identify the different layers, right? So this is like a slightly different, more cartoony version than this one, but you'd still be able to identify these, right? Yeah, and you don't have to distinguish between 8 and 9. Those are like the xylem or the phloem. But you'd have to know that the whole thing, this whole region right here, is the vein, the vascular bundle, right? So up here is the cuticle. Number 1 is the cuticle, right? Number 2 is the epidermis. Number 3 is the palisade mesophyll cells, right? Here are the spongy mesophyll. Here they're a little more like less like densely organized. Here's the lower epidermis here, and then right here, here's the stoma, and then these would be the guard cells on either side, right? That are controlling the opening of the stoma, right? And the water is evaporating through the stoma, right? Transpiring, and then the carbon dioxide is going into the stoma. Okay? Questions? And again, when the guard cells are like full of water, are they going to be open or closed? Is the stomata going to be open or closed? If these guard cells are full of water and really taut and like really like engorged, what would they be, open or closed? Anyone?
Open.
They'd be open, right? And you can also think about it in terms of water. Like if you have enough water, then you can open and like let more water evaporate, right? Whereas if you don't have enough water, then they're going to be all limp and kind of like, shriveled. But that means that the plant might not have enough water. So that means it wants to probably conserve more water. So it needs to close so no more water gets lost through that too. So it's very like, functional. It's like a good like way of conserving and controlling the amount of water inside the plant. Okay. Questions? No? Okay. So tomorrow we're doing energy, Wednesday, Thursday, photosynthesis, light reactions, and then dark reactions. And then on Friday, quiz. Okay? Yes. Okay. So yeah, you guys already have the handout from today, right? I mean, from the rest of the plant unit? Yes? No? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So, just finish that, upload it, and then tomorrow I'll give you like, we'll do the rest, the energy stuff, okay? Yes, all right. Have a great day, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good
Bye.
one.
Thank you.
You too, bye.